Greetings. Thanks to all of you for coming out tonight to our group author reading. This reading is brought to you by Strong Women, Strange Worlds, which is a group of authors supporting authors. Our mission is to elevate the voices of women and non-binary authors of science fiction, fantasy, and horror through events like our bi-monthly virtual quick read sessions. You can find out more about Strong Women, Strange Worlds in the handout we've provided in the chat and by visiting our website, a link to which is going to be added to the chat real soon now. Our website is https:// Women Strange Worlds, and word at weebly.com. I'd also like to take a moment to thank all of you who have made a tip jar donation. Mwah! We appreciate you so much. Please note that this recording of this session by the audience is not allowed, and recording of electronic communications, including Zoom meetings and webinars, without permission is illegal. Today we'll be featuring 5 authors: Cari Lyn Jones, Judith Rossell, Jessica Lucci, Mary G. Thompson, and Julie Leong. Each author will have 8 minutes to read. Our first reader is Cari Lyn Jones. Cari Lyn Jones grew up on the east coast of South Florida. She spent most of her childhood writing, reading, and daydreaming, often all at the same time. She writes whatever stories her muse decides to whisper into her ear, mostly fairy tales and gas lamp fantasy, with a little epic fantasy thrown in now and then, just for fun. Take it away, Cari Lyn.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. Where the Angels Dream is a gas lamp fantasy that centers around Devin and Sarah Amaris, 2 siblings with an affinity for the dead. They can hear them speak. What's more, Sarah can see them just as easily as she would be able to see you or I. Today, I will be reading from Chapter 8, where Sarah finds herself in a private theater box with her schoolmaster's benefactress, the mysterious Lady Anna. Sarah doesn't know a great deal about her, but she does know she's a powerful practitioner of magic. It is Lady Anna who is speaking. Tell me, Miss Amaris, have you been to a vaudeville show before? I have not, Sarah admitted, looking at the hound who was sitting next to her feet, one rust-colored ear cocked back in their direction. This is my first trip to a theater, to be honest. I would expect nothing less than honesty from you, the lady smiled. Well, I can promise you will see and hear many a curiosity this evening. The shadows around them deepened then, as the stage lights came up. Sarah shifted forward in her seat, everything else forgotten, as the curtain rose to reveal a snowy field beneath a painted, starry sky. Across this landscape came a troupe of dancers, men and women dressed in spectacular costumes. They leapt and spun and threw each other impossibly high into the air. Sarah gasped and clapped along with everyone else each time they did. Then they were gone, chased into the shadowy wings by deafening applause. An expectant hush fell over the audience as one by one the lights snuffed out, until the whole of the theater lay in complete darkness. The moment stretched on, for an eternity, until Sarah felt her anticipation begin to shift to uneasiness. Then, with the suddenness of a thunderclap, a spotlight lanced down from above, illuminating a shrouded woman. She sat enthroned on an elaborate chair of bleached bones, or so it had been made to look, with grinning skulls peering over her shoulders and resting beneath each hand. Chains snaked through their empty eye sockets, coming to an end at the shackles on the woman's wrists. She wore a diaphanous white gown, and a veil of white muslin lay draped over her head. What was most interesting, though, at least to Sarah's mind, was something the rest of the audience could not see. There was a dozen or so spirits that sat at the woman's feet. It was clear to Sarah that this was the Madame Cochet, mysterious messenger of the dead, who had been listed on the playbill that she had noticed out front of the theater. She had been too excited to give it much thought then, and even if she had, she would not have been inclined to believe her a true medium. There were many who claimed to be able to speak to the dead, but few that actually could. The fact that there were spirits waiting around her, like well-mannered schoolchildren, seemed to suggest that Madame Cochet might indeed be able to do as she claimed. One of the spirits, a large, big-bellied man, stood up. Sarah watched as he sat right down in the already occupied chair. His body, seemingly solid to Sarah's eyes, melted into that of the shrouded woman, the gauze veil billowing noticeably as the spirit took possession of her body. A voice issued from behind Madame Cochet's veil, which was clearly not her own. It called out to someone named Iris, reminding her to plant the roses like she'd promised. It also told her she was well rid of that useless husband of hers, so there was no need for tears. At this proclamation, a young woman stood up from the audience, crying out to her papa that she missed him and tearfully promising that she would do as he asked. Then the spirit emerged from the body that it had just taken possession of. He was followed by another, then another. Each time a different voice issued from behind the veil, and each time the voice was met by either tears of grief or cries of gratitude from someone in the audience. There was one lone heckler, but he was quickly disabused of his skepticism when his own mother spoke to him and revealed a secret he would have probably rather she hadn't. There was an uneasiness that grew in Sarah each time a spirit entered the shrouded woman's body, but she could not say why. After all, it was not like she was unfamiliar with channeling and mediumship. She had read a great deal about such things in her father's library, and it was, in essence, that much as what she herself could do. There were several religions where possession was a part of their rituals. Though she had never allowed herself to be completely taken over by a spirit, the idea had never made her feel uneasy. But what she was witnessing now did, without a doubt. The final spirit to come to the shrouded woman did not stand up from the group seated at her feet. Instead, he was pulled from out of the audience, somewhat reluctantly from what Sarah could see. If it had been odd watching the other spirits' seemingly solid bodies sink willingly into the other solid body enthroned on its macabre chair, watching the reluctant spirit pulled in head first was 100 times more so. The filmy dress the medium wore billowed out, enveloping the spirit, devouring it like an octopus would a struggling fish. An ominous stillness settled over the shrouded figure. Then she began to writhe, her back arched and her body contorted unnaturally. The veil covering the woman's face was sucked into her mouth as it opened in a silent scream. Then suddenly the figure was on its feet. The spirit that had been inside her now lay on the floor, curled up in a fetal position. Sarah gasped and stood up from where her own chair, just as a voice from the stage cried out, "The dead have spoken," and everything went dark. Sarah was still standing when the lights came back on to reveal an empty stage, its curtain lowered once again. Sarah glanced around self-consciously. Miss Newkirk was too engrossed with Mr. Hedges and seemed not to have noticed Sarah's distress. The same could not be said for Lady Anna, who Sarah found watching her with a knowing smile. Sarah apologized as she sat back down, but offered no explanation for her outburst. She was not sure how to explain it, even to Lady Anna, who was a practitioner and no stranger to the unseen world. It was just not something she often talked about. She jumped a little when Lady Anna asked in a neutral voice, "And what were your thoughts on Madame Cochet?" "I will admit she made me feel very uneasy," Sarah answered, truthfully, "though I cannot say exactly why." The lady nodded her head once in accord. "Your feelings mirror mine, then," she confessed, but offered no further explanation. Her attention returned back to the stage and the curtain that was once again rising. I will stop there. Thank you so much for listening. Where the Angels Dream will be free to read October 24th through October 31st on Ream. Thank you.
Wow. All right. Well, sorry about that, everyone. And I guess spoiler alert, don't look at my name there. That's a secret for later. Our second reader is Judith Rossell. Rossell? Sorry, girl. Judith Rossell is the author-illustrator of the best-selling, multi-award-winning Stella Montgomery trilogy and the new illustrated novel, The Midwatch Institute for Wayward Girls. She has written 16 books and illustrated more than 80, and her books have been translated into 20 languages. She lives in Australia. Judith, whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm beaming in from Sydney. It seems extraordinary to be able to do this around the world, doesn't it? The tech is really amazing, even when it's a bit, Thank you for having me. My story, The Midwatch Institute for Wayward Girls, is a story set in an alternative 1920s city, and my girls are, on the face of it, downtrodden orphans, but are secretly detectives. And in this scene, they are investigating the disappearance of an orchid expert, and they're in the city library. The library basement was silent and smelled of dust. Maggie, Nell and Sophie made their way along the narrow passageways between the bookshelves. Nell's eyes were shining. "I never knew there were so many books," she whispered. "Imagine reading them all. You'd know just about everything in the world, wouldn't you? Look, here's one all about anteaters. And here's one about elephant seals. This looks real interesting." She reached for the book, but Sophie grabbed her hand and pulled her along. "We're looking for books about orchids," she said firmly. "Elephant seals are not orchids." They turned a corner and Nell whispered, "Look, worms of the world. And look at this big book about snails. Imagine knowing this much about snails. Wouldn't that be wonderful?" Maggie and Sophie propelled her past books about centipedes and scorpions and a collection of gleaming beetles in a dusty glass case. They turned another corner and Nell stopped. "Look, notable trees of Kentucky and giant kelp forests. These books are about plants," Nell said. "Orchids have got to be someplace around here." They came to an alcove containing a wooden chair and a small desk with a green shaded lamp on it. "Maybe this is where Miss Fenchurch sat to read," whispered Maggie. Sophie ran her finger along the seat of the chair and looked at it. "There is no dust, and everything here is dusty. Someone sat at this chair not so long ago." Nell opened the desk drawer. It was empty except for a dead moth. Maggie crouched down to peer underneath. Something had fallen into the gap between the desk and the bookshelf. She squeezed her hand in and pulled out a sheet of notepaper. At the top was the city library letterhead, and below that was a long list of book titles. At the bottom was written, "I trust you will find this useful. Kind regards, B.E." "B.E., she gasped. "E for Entwistle. I bet this is the book list Dr. Entwistle made for Miss Fenchurch." Nell ran her finger down the list. "It must be," she whispered. "These are all books about flowers." They scanned the shelves. "There," said Nell, pointing up at a high shelf. Sophie dragged the chair down the aisle and climbed up onto it and passed Flowering Plants of the Ottoman Empire down to them. They laid it on the desk and opened it up. It was full of dense black writing and pictures of strange-looking flowers. "The petals are ligulate, glabrous, tuberculate, undulated, emarginate," read Sophie, frowning as she sounded out the unfamiliar words. "This means nothing at all, I think." "It must mean something," said Nell. "I guess if Miss Fenchurch understood this, she sure knew a whole bunch about flowers." They hunted for the other books on the list. Maggie found Wildflower Hunting in Transylvania. "If Miss Fenchurch found something that she wanted to tell Dr. Entwistle about, how would we ever figure out what it was?" she said as she turned the pages. "It could be anything." Nell crouched down, running her finger along a low shelf and murmuring under her breath. She pulled out a book with a green cover and a picture of a curling vine twining around gilt lettering, "Some Reflections on the Properties of Plants." Maggie clambered up on a chair to reach the next book on the list, Perennials of Penang. Sophie searched along the bookshelves for Endangered Flowers of the Congo. Nell gave a sudden gasp. "Look!" She was sitting on the floor, staring at the book that lay open in her lap. "What is it?" asked Sophie. "Come and see," said Nell. Her voice was almost a squeak. "Holy mackerel," said Maggie. "What is that?" said Sophie. The pages of the book had been cut to make a hole a few inches square. a secret hiding place, and lying inside was a sparkling, jeweled dragonfly. They heard footsteps and looked up quickly. It was Harriet and Betsy. "There you are. How are you getting on?" whispered Harriet. "We haven't found anything so far, except for a stuffed weasel that looks like Miss Fortnightly," said Betsy, giggling. "It's exactly like her," said Harriet. "You've got to... Have you... Jeepers, what's that?" "It's a brooch, I think," whispered Nell. She stood up and took the dragonfly out of the book. The jewels twinkled and shimmered in the dim light. "What the heck?" said Betsy. "Crumbs, why would anyone..." Harriet broke off with a gasp. Maggie spun around. Her heart gave a horrible thump. A big man loomed over them. They hadn't heard him approach. He was suddenly just there. He was very tall, with wide, square shoulders. He filled the narrow passageway between the bookshelves. He was wearing a pointed leather hat with a fur brim, a long, dark, shaggy coat, and black gloves. His face looked like it had been carved out of a boulder with a hatchet. His tiny, glittering eyes were fixed on the dragonfly in Nell's hand. He made a growling sound in his throat. Nell stepped backwards nervously, closing her fingers over the dragonfly. He reached out and grabbed her wrist, and she yelped in pain. "Let her go," said Harriet, pushing forward. The man knocked Harriet aside and started to force Nell's fingers open. Suddenly, Spike is a rat. Suddenly, Spike shot out of Nell's pocket with an angry squeak and hurled himself at the man's face, sinking his teeth into his nose. The man let go of Nell and staggered backwards, clutching his face. Spike flew into the air, bounced off a bookshelf, and tumbled to the floor. Nell shrieked. As she scooped up Spike, the dragonfly hit the floor and skidded away. Maggie flung herself down and peered under the bookshelf. She could see the dragonfly glimmering. She shoved her arm underneath, trying to reach it. The man lunged forward again. Betsy grabbed Nell's hand and yanked her away from him. "Run," yelled Harriet. She threw a book at him. It missed. He tried to swat Sophie aside, but she ducked. He tried again. This time Sophie sprang neatly backwards onto her hands, flipping onto her feet and landing out of his reach, close beside Maggie. Everyone gasped in surprise. "Run," yelled Harriet again, backing away. She flung another book at the man. It hit his head and he stumbled sideways and collided with a bookshelf. It rocked and an avalanche of books fell down, thumping to the floor. Nell and Betsy turned and fled. Maggie's reaching fingers felt the dragonfly. "Quick," gasped Sophie. Maggie snatched up the dragonfly, scrambled to her feet, grabbed Sophie's outstretched hand, and they raced away. Useful things every girl should know. How to create a disguise. It is essential to consider your surroundings. In a forest, you could easily escape notice by putting mud on your face and leaves in your hair and grunting like a wild pig. But this would be far less effective at a fashionable party. In the street, carry a parcel and hurry as if on an errand. At the market, pretend to be buying vegetables. Most people do not observe properly. They see only what they are expecting to see. Wear a maid's uniform and your enemies will see only a maid. Chalk a hopscotch on the sidewalk and you will become merely a harmless child playing. Conceal yourself in a crowd, copy those around you and do nothing to attract attention. Your enemies will expect you to be nervous and watchful, so endeavour to appear calm and busy. Alternatively, you could attempt to hide in plain sight. I was once able to evade detection at a vaudeville show by performing on the trapeze. My enemies were searching the audience and never realised I was dangling above their heads, wearing nothing but sequins. I'll stop there. Thank you so much for listening and thank you for having me.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. Our next author is hiding in the wrong thing. There we go. Our third reader is Jessica Lucci. Jessica Lucci is a poet and steampunk author who writes about modern issues while maintaining historic integrity. All of her books feature multifaceted LGBTQ+ main characters. Her new release is Rivets and Revolution. Take it away, Jessica.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Bill. I'm so glad you made it in. Thank you. And I am just already so amazed and intrigued by the stories I've heard before me. Gaslamp Fantasy, Alternate 1920 City. Yes, sign me up for both of those. It was so amazing. My book that I'm reading from today is not gas lamp fantasy, but it's a cousin of it. It's steampunk, and it's an alternate 1775 city instead of an alternate 1920s city. So it's like we kind of all mingle together in the same kind of Venn diagram of genres. So this is my steampunk book. It's Rivets and Revolution, and I will use my handy dandy glasses to read the back to you. Rebellion in the shadow of war spreads across a British colony powered by steam and mechanisms. Liberty, the printing press master, is desperate to aid the Minutemen. When she risks everything to become a rebel spy, she forges unity with foreign kingdoms against an unexpected foe. All the while, she depends on her lover, Georgia, the lady of the governor's mansion, to keep her secret, even when their lives hang in the balance. If Liberty cannot navigate in this war of worlds to freedom, a mysterious being will overtake them all. So let me read to you this part of the story is where Liberty, as master of the printing press, is in charge of spreading the news to the colonists, which the British loyalists don't like, because freedom of speech, freedom of the press, what? Nah, we don't need that. So here is where I'm going to open with this book. When Lieutenant Birch returned, Liberty had left the heavy door open and was leaning over the press with her big leather apron on, focused on her next job. There were constant news updates that the Patriots needed printed. She was glad to do her part and make a dependable income. Without looking up, Liberty said, "I have not completed the work." Birch's tone was brusque. "Show me what you have thus accomplished." Liberty reached into the large tool bag at her hip. Her fist came out tightly clenched. In a quick jerk, she swung her arm like a young girl feeding chickens, moving her arm as if she were scattering seeds. Birch jumped, immediately furious with embarrassment. "What are you doing, crazy lady?" "I'm giving you all that you'll get from me. Scat. Shoo. Print this or pay the consequences." Liberty continued typesetting rows of letters for the next job. Spelling helped her remember everything she printed. Birch was infuriated at being ignored. "Are you inept or simply mad?" "Just a woman doing her job." Lieutenant Birch spat on the floor. Liberty's stomach churned. Men were so gross. "Print it. My men need it." Liberty kept on her typesetting. "I didn't know so many of you were literate." In a flash of red, Birch was at her back and grabbing her braid. "You don't want to lose your head, do you?" Liberty shook in fear and indignity. She was too shocked to speak. He released his grip and spun away. "1 hour, woman, or else." Liberty kept her back to the door and waited until she heard it close. She braced herself against her beloved machine, tucked her chin to her chest, and stiffly lowered herself to the floor. She knelt huddled under her big apron, covered her face, and cried, heaving, silent tears. Finally, she stood and dried her face with an ink-stained cloth she kept notched to her apron's belt. Then she took a deep breath and resigned herself to completing the task, still shaking. Errant tears trickled down her face. Liberty was angry, mostly at herself. She wanted to defend her beliefs, but needed to protect the press. If the only way to get the redcoats out of her hair was to succumb, then she would. She could see no other choice. But someday, she promised herself, she would stand up to all of them. And that's my reading from Rivets and Revolution. And I am doing an ebook giveaway. So if you would like to sign up, then look in the chat about with directions about how to do that. Thank you so much. And bye, Bill. Bye, everybody. I can't wait to hear everybody else's readings.
That was fantastic. I love the being torn between like having to protect her printing press, but also like wanting to stand up. It was fantastic, and it feels very timely. Our fourth reader is Mary G. Thompson. Mary G. Thompson is the author of the sci-fi novella One Level Down, published in 2025 by Tachyon Press. She also writes YA and children's sci-fi fantasy, YA contemporary thrillers, and short fiction. Mary holds an MFA in writing for children and completed the UCLA School of Theater, Film, and Television's professional program in screenwriting. She lives in Washington, D.C. Mary, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So I'm going to read from my novella, One Level Down, which is about a woman who lives in a simulated universe, and she's 58 years old, but she's forced to look and act 5 years old by her father, who controls the parameters of her program. So I'm just going to read chapter 1. Our teacher, Camilla Wolkowitz, has driven us in the truck to the edge of the forest. By the time we reach the place where the trees thin out into the meadow, the sun has gone down. Camilla has passed out small, solar-powered portable lights, and all 7 of us kindergartners are sitting on our benches in the open truck bed holding them. The kids are awed by being so far from the town at night. They speak to each other in whispers. This is probably my 30th field trip to the landing site, but I feel it too. It's as unusual for me to be out this far as it is for them. I want to see the ship, Katie says to me in a whisper shout. There's no ship, I say. The ship went back to where it came from. Why? Because it was expensive, and Daddy sold it to help pay for this. I wave my arm at the forest, the sky, everything. But of course, Katie doesn't understand. Some of the adults who were born here don't care to think about the nature of our universe. How can I expect a 5-year-old to get what I mean by a hand gesture? Next, I'll try explaining that Daddy could have had another ship made out of thin air if he'd wanted to. I thought there was a spaceship, she says, peering over her lantern. Everyone, let's climb down. Careful now. Camilla glares up at me from her position at the bottom of the ramp leading down from the truck bed. For the last few minutes, I've been studiously ignoring her huffs and puffs as she wrangled the ramp into place. I shrug and smile at her. What do you expect a little girl like me to do? I say with my eyes. The kids file down the ramp, stepping on each other's ankles. I wait and go last. Over time, it's become second nature. When the kids are doing something fun, I try not to get in the way. It can be exhilarating to watch them experience all this for the first time. They have so much potential now. They could grow up to be the kind of people who want to explore our universe, who want to test its limits, who want to see how far we can go before the edges of the simulation dissolve. Or they could grow up to be like our teacher, plodding along year after year inside the world Daddy and his generation created. I walk down the ramp with purpose, holding my head high, making as much impact with my tiny feet as I can. The kids aren't watching me, and Camilla doesn't have the spine to report to Daddy. All she cares about is that no one reports to him on her. Can you be helpful for once, Ella? Are you going to teach them about how most of the stars up there will turn out to be illusions if we ever try to observe them up close? She doesn't humor me with an answer. Instead, she follows the kids into the meadow. They're waving their lanterns in each other's faces, attracting flies by the hundred, sending bugs flying all around their heads. Eek, stop! Jaden is chasing Katie around with 2 lanterns. She grabs one from another kid and waves it back in his face. Bugs to you, she yells. Jaden drops both lanterns and swats at the flies around his face. Someone else has started crying. I stand at the edge of the meadow laughing. This has gone south faster than usual. Then again, I've never seen so many flies. It's probably related to the precipitous decline in the bird population, which is no laughing matter, but I don't care right now. I'm having a night away from Daddy, and I'm going to enjoy it. Camilla wades into the middle of the fray. Okay, hand the lanterns over, she says. She walks around collecting them, and as she sets them down in a pile, she turns them off one by one. That has a magic effect on the kids, who finally sit on the grass and stay reasonably still. Camilla holds the last lantern. This is the spot where Philip Harkin first landed on Bella Anizio, she says. The spaceship was only a little bit bigger than our schoolhouse, and he was all alone. And he was very brave, because very few people had traveled this far from Earth. And he was very strong, and that's why the people chose him to go and find a planet for them to live on. Katie raises her hand high. Yes, Katie? Is that Ella's daddy? Yes, that's right, Camilla says, her voice strained. All the kids turn to look at me. I'm standing with my arms folded and my feet planted. I hope they can't see my face in the darkness, because I can't bring myself to put on the mask right now. I'm 58 years old, and I don't want to pretend to be 5 tonight. But I see the panic in Camilla's eyes, and I let my body relax. I unplant my feet and shift from one foot to the other. Ella, why aren't you with the group? Camilla asks. I saw a rabbit, I say, bounding over to the others and sitting at the end of the row. No, you didn't, Jaden retorts. Yes, I did. Don't go running off again. We're all going to stay right here, okay? Camilla pastes a smile on her face and goes on with her lesson. 66 years ago, right at this time of night, right here, Philip Harkin landed his ship, and he stepped out into this meadow and saw what we're seeing right now. Camilla turns off her lantern and looks up. My eyes are already acclimated to the darkness. I look up with the other kids. The moon is tiny, barely a pinprick, but the stars shine brightly across the sky. Despite myself, I get caught up. I see our sky through Daddy's eyes. I imagine what it must have been like to be here all alone on a strange planet, the first human ever to set foot here, the first human ever to see these constellations. I breathe in the cool night air and imagine what it must have felt like for him to breathe it in for the first time. Practically, there's no difference between what we're experiencing now and what Daddy felt. The simulation is as real to us as the planet was to Daddy. If I were suddenly sitting in the grass on the original Bella Anizio, I'd never even know I'd been moved. I guess that's why they wait a few years to explain all that to the kids. For now, they just tell the story of Daddy's brave solo flight, the colonists' great migration, the founding of Harkintown. I wonder what the original looks like now, 66 years later. Time passes the same out there as in here. Are the buildings still standing, or has time and weather reduced them to ruins? I look up at the stars, knowing that even if Daddy ever lets me go, I'll never find what I'm looking for. I'll never see the real Bella Anizio. I'll never see Earth. I'll always be here in this universe, rubbing up against the edges. As Camilla continues telling the story, I shift on the grass so I can look behind me and to my left, to where the road continues along the meadow, out toward what's now a series of farms. I don't have to look far to see the spot where the servers are located on the real planet, where we actually are. Here there's nothing to mark the spot, but that's where he'll appear, or she, or they, or maybe it, the technician who's due to stop by and check up on us per Daddy's contract. Whoever will come will appear there, and he'll be the first person from outside ever to set foot in Bella Anizio. I quickly go back to watching Camilla. If she knew what I wanted to do, she'd tell Daddy. And I don't blame her. After what he did to her, it wouldn't be fair for me to expect more. And now we all get to live here, Camilla finishes. Katie raises her hand again. Why was Earth bad? Well, it wasn't bad, Camilla says, but it was crowded. There were so many people that there were hardly any other animals or plants. They don't have forests like this one anymore. She gestures at the forest behind her, which spreads farther than the eye can see, even in daylight. Did everyone leave? We don't know what happened after we left, Camilla says. They might have gone to other planets. Or continued the trend toward entering simulated universes and leaving their bodies to rot, I think. But of course she isn't going to say that. Why don't we know? We're going to have to talk about that some other time, Katie, Camilla says. It's time to go home now. Everyone take a lantern and no fighting or we'll just ride home in the dark. Wordlessly, I head for the pile of lanterns and help her hand them out to the kids. They manage not to be too unruly as we begin the short walk back to the truck. Stay together, Camilla shouts after them as Jaden runs ahead. Of all of them, he's the most likely to get lost in the woods for a few hours. Don't you ever wonder what's happening in the real world, I ask her. This is the real world, Ella, she says, sighing. You're real and I'm real. All brains are just elaborate programs. What does it matter if ours are held in a server instead of a mass of flesh? You're right, everything here is completely You're right, everything here is completely the same. I can't keep the bitterness out of my voice, especially now that we're about to get back in the truck and head home. She stops short and looks down at me. I'm sorry, Ella, she says. I really am. My stomach twists. Don't be. There's a long silence. She looks down at me, and I look up. She's seeing the face of a cute little 5-year-old girl. I'm locking eyes with a woman who appears to be in her 30s, but is actually 47. I'm older than she is by 11 years, and like every other adult on this planet, she knows it. Katie tugs at my sleeve. What is it? Ella, where's the truck? What do you mean? I don't know why she's asking me and not her teacher. Actually, I have a terrible idea of why. Katie's smart enough to understand that something's different about me. I need to do better around her. I need to make sure she doesn't act like this around Daddy. Oh, my stars, Camilla says. Katie and I follow her eyes. The other 5 kids are all standing where the truck used to be. The entire road is empty. There's no truck. And there's no way we miss somebody driving it away. Camilla pulls her walkie-talkie out of its holster. This is Camilla Wolkowitz, she says. I've got my kindergartners on a field trip to Day One Meadow. We're going to need another truck. I'm sorry, can you just send someone out? Yes, it's not operational. Okay, thank you. She carefully doesn't look at me as she returns the walkie-talkie to her belt. We both know what the missing truck means. Okay, let's gather in a circle, Camilla says, making her voice as cheery as possible. We're going to play a couple games before we go home. Katie stays next to me, and as the game begins, she takes my hand. The lanterns, now set in the ground in front of us, light up the kids' faces. Something's wrong, Katie says. It's all right, I say. It's just a glitch. It can't hurt you. But can it? She and I and all of us here are elements of our universe, just like the truck. And so far, nothing that's gone missing has reappeared. That's it.
Thank you. That was excellent. Sorry to cut you off there, but I'm glad we were able to catch that ending. All right. Our 5th reader is Julie Leong. Julie Leong is the U.S. Today and internationally best-selling author of The Teller of Small Fortunes and The Keeper of Magical Things. She is a daughter of immigrants and a graduate of Yale University. Julie lives in San Francisco, and when she's not writing, enjoys making unnecessary spreadsheets and flambeing things. Julie, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks everyone for having me. So quick context, The Keeper of Magical Things, which came out 2 days ago, is about Certainty Bulrush, who is a novice mage in the Guild of Mages in this fantasy world. She's been stuck at the novice level for years because her only notable magical ability is that she can talk to physical objects. It's kind of weaker than all of her classmates. So she's pretty desperate to prove herself and win advancement. She thinks she might finally have the chance to do so when the guild gives her an unexpected assignment. She has to transport a stockpile of minor, unimportant magical artifacts out of the guild for safekeeping somewhere remote, somewhere out of the way, somewhere completely unmagical, this tiny little farming village called Spelling. And on that assignment, she's paired with Mage Aurelia Morellin, who's a much more magically powerful overachiever from a wealthy family. She's basically Certainty's opposite. Inconveniently, she's also very pretty and more complex than her icy exterior suggests. So in the excerpt that I'm going to read, the 2 women, Certainty and Aurelia, have recently arrived at this village and found themselves a distinct lack of welcome. The warehouse that they're meant to be storing the artifacts in has turned out to be actually just an old stable building that's in pretty bad disrepair, and the villagers that they've met so far have been strangely unfriendly to them. But a village boy named Orin has just approached them to offer his assistance. Also, apologies in advance. I'm getting over a cold, so I don't normally sound like a dying frog, but okay. Certainty grinned and gestured him into the stable, but he looked down again at the line of salt. Do I just step over it? Do I have to say anything, or just walk over it? You'll be completely fine, Certainty reassured him. Unless you're trying to steal any guild artifacts, Aurelia said. He shook his head fervently and, looking like he was holding his breath, stepped across the line. Nothing happened, and he gusted out a sigh of relief. See? Nothing at all to be worried about, said Aurelia. But one more thing. Please make very sure not to touch any of the items inside without gloves on, Orin, or terrible things will happen and you'll put everyone in the village and possibly the entire kingdom at risk. Orin went pale, and Certainty glared at Aurelia. Really? Bad things, the mage amended. Moderately bad things might happen. Certainty gave the boy her most reassuring smile and tossed him a spare pair of gloves. You'll be fine. All right. He tugged on the gloves uncertainly, but looked like he might be starting to regret his offer. Still, with an encouraging nod from Certainty, he hefted his bag of tools and followed them in. Once inside, Orrin boggled at the shelves in the stalls, the piled boxes, and the labeled and unlabeled artifacts laid out in neat rows in the shaw. What are all of these things? Guild business, said Aurelia primly. Certainty rolled her eyes at the mage. The boy wasn't an enemy spy, and what they were doing here was hardly a secret. They're magical artifacts, Orrin. Oh. The boy eyed the nearest pile. That looks like a pair of dirty knickers over there. Magical dirty knickers. What do they do? Well, the knickers didn't have a label on them yet. We don't actually know. But that's what we're doing here, you see. Mage Aurelia and I are taking inventory of all of these artifacts. We're checking what their enchantments are and entering them into the guild's records so that the artifacts can be safely stored here and retrieved should anyone ever, need to use them. Orrin nodded, but his expression suggested a great deal of doubt that anyone would ever want to use a pair of stained undergarments that may or may not be enchanted to do something mysterious. He pointed at a small pewter statue of a chicken sitting on a shelf. What's that one do? Makes your enemy's food always taste of eggs. What about that one? He pointed at a chipped teapot with a floral pattern on it. Conversational teapot. Makes perfectly brewed tea every time, but will talk your ear off as it does. Certainty had taken special note of that one. She had very high standards for tea and thought that they might be able to make use of it while they were here. Oh. Orrin sounded distinctly unimpressed. But then he saw the rusty sword lying across their work table, and his face lit up. Wow, is that a magic sword? Well, yes, Certainty said. She just finished identifying it earlier. Sort of. Neat. What's its enchantment? Aurelia asked, curious. I'd have thought that any magic swords would be classified as second-degree artifacts at least. Not this one. Certainty walked over to it, pulling off one glove and picking up the weapon by its worn leather hilt. It's meant to be a flaming sword, but the enchantment's worn off over time, so... She gave it a quick slash through the air and felt its magic kindle. A tiny, cheeky spurt of flame flicked out from the sword tip. It was rather like seeing a giant blow a bubble. That's it? Asked Orrin, clearly disappointed. Ah, said Aurelia. I see. It could still be useful, Certainty said, feeling oddly defensive of the sword. It was doing its best. I thought maybe we could use it to light the stove instead of your having to cast a fire spell every morning. Aurelia thought about it for a moment, then nodded. I suppose there's no harm in that if we're careful. Orrin cleared his throat, his interest in the scattered artifacts clearly diminished by Certainty's demonstration. So if you two are busy with all of these things, then how can I help? Aurelia and Certainty looked at each other. The leaking roof, suggested Certainty. The drafty windows. The door sticks sometimes when it's damp. Oh, and some furniture maybe. It'd be nice to sleep on proper beds. Right, Orrin said hastily. Maybe I'll start with that. Certainty looked at him with surprise. Do you know how to build beds? He shrugged. Can't be that hard. They're just long tables that you lie on, aren't they? And with that, he hefted his tools and entered the carriage house, whistling as he went. The two women looked at each other. I told you they don't hate us, Certainty said smugly, and went to put the chatty teapot and flaming sword by the stove. I'll pause there. Keyword magical links. Thanks.
That was so cute. I loved all the little magical people and all the little things. Adorable. I'm definitely putting this book on my TBR. All right, audience. Let's all suspend disbelief just a little bit more as I turn into two different people for a hot second. Wait, do you feel a presence here with us on Zoom? I sense a restless spirit in our midst. Who's there? It must be another author longing to read to us. I sense her. Our final reader is... Selma Lagerlof. Oh, sorry, I'm not Selma yet, just kidding. Selma Lagerlof, born in 1858, was a Swedish writer and teacher and was active in the suffrage movement in Sweden. She was the first woman to win the Nobel Prize in Literature, which was awarded to her in 1909. In reaction to the realism of other Swedish writers of the time, she often included elements of fantasy in her work. She passed beyond the veil in 1940, but we're delighted to channel her spirit today. Selma, what would you like to share with us tonight? Hello. From beyond the veil, I have inhabited this vessel to read to you from my work, The Wonderful Adventure of Nils. Today I'm going to be reading about the Wind Witch. In bygone days, there was something in Narka, the like of which was not found elsewhere. It was a witch named Isater Kaisa. The name Kaisa has been given to her because she had a good deal to do with wind and storm, and these witches are always so called. The surname was added because she was supposed to have come from Isater Swamp in Oxer Parish. It seemed as though her real abode must have been in Oxer, but she used to also to appear in other places. Nowhere in all of Narka could one be sure of not meeting her. Now she was no dark, mournful witch, but gay and frolicsome, and what she loved most of all was a gale of wind. As soon as there was wind enough, off she would fly to the Narka plain for a good dance. On days when a whirlwind swept the plain, Isater Kaisa had fun. She would stand right in the wind and spin round, her long hair flying up among the clouds, and the long trail of her robe sweeping the ground like a dust cloud, while the whole plain lay spread out under her like a ballroom floor. Of a morning, Isater Kaisa would sit up in some tall pines at the top of a precipice and look out across the plain. If it happened to be winter and she saw many teams on the road, she hurriedly blew up a blizzard, piling the drifts so high that people could barely get back to their homes by evening. If it chanced to be summer and good harvest weather, Isater Kaisa would sit quietly until the first hayricks had been loaded. Then down she would come with a couple heavy showers, which put an end to work for the day. It was only too true that she seldom thought of anything else than raising mischief. The charcoal burners up in the Kill Mountains hardly dared take a cat nap, for as soon as she saw an unwatched kiln, she stole up and blew on it until it began to burn in a great flame. If the metal drivers from Laksa and Svarta were out late of an evening, Isater Kaisa would veil the roads in the country round about in such dark clouds that both men and horses lost their way and drove the heavy trucks down into the swamps and morasses. If, on a summer's day, the dean's wife at Glanshammar had spread the tea table in the garden, and along would come such a gust of wind that lifted the cloth from the table and turned over cups and saucers, they knew who had raised the mischief. If the mayor of Urunbra's hat blew off so that he had to run across the whole square after it, if the wash on the line blew away and got covered with dirt, or if smoke poured into the cabins and seemed unable to find its way out through the chimney, it was easy enough to guess who was out making merry. Although Isater Kaisa was fond of all sorts of tantalizing games, there was nothing really bad about her. One could see that she was hardest on those who were quarrelsome, stingy, or wicked, while honest folks and poor little children she would take under her wing. Old people say of her that once, when Oxar Church was burning, Isater Kaisa swept through the air, lit amid fire and smoke on the church roof, and averted the disaster. All the same, the Narka folk were often rather tired of Isater Kaisa, but she never tired of playing her tricks on them. As she sat on the edge of a cloud and looked down upon Narka, which rested so peacefully and comfortably beneath her, she must have thought, the inhabitants would fare much too well if I were not in existence. They would grow sleepy and dull. There must be someone like myself to rouse them and keep them in good spirits. Then she would laugh wildly and, chattering like a magpie, would rush off, dancing and spinning from one end of the plane to the other. When the narcoman saw her come, dragging her dust trail over the plain, could not help smiling. Provoking and tiresome she certainly was, but she had a merry spirit. It was just as refreshing for the peasants to meet Isatrakaisa as it was for the plain to be lashed by the windstorm. Nowadays, 'tis said that Isatrakaisa is dead and gone, like all other witches. But this one can hardly believe. It is as if someone were to come and tell you that henceforth the air would always be still on the plain, and the wind would never more dance across it with blustering breezes and drenching showers. He who fancies that Isatrakaisa is dead and gone may as well hear what occurred in Narka, the year that Nils Hogosund traveled over that part of the country. Then let him tell what he thinks about that. And if you want to know what happens with that, you'll have to find my works. You can find me on Project Gutenberg, and that is where I'm going to leave off. And now I'm me again. All right. Thank you so much to everyone who came out today.